Well, Raider Nation, a rough day at the office for your Las Vegas Raiders, who fall 34-18 against the Denver Broncos. Eddie Paskal here with my guy Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports in the fifth quarter, presented by Twitch. Fitz, let's zoom out, right? Because I tweeted this after the game. 10-0 felt like a long time ago by the time the clock hits 000. In kind of like a big picture type of way, through two drives, everything looking great for the Raiders. Up 10-0, vibes are good, things are swimming, right? What happened the rest of the way?
It's amazing how one play can change so much momentum. And I mean, I can't over exaggerate here what it meant when the Raiders were driving down the field up at that point 10-3 with the chance to go up. We all thought 17-3, an overthrow on a miscommunication leads to a pick six. And you watch that pick six and you felt the energy just deflate. I should stress this is a Broncos team that, frankly, on all my shows on Yahoo, I've been really tough on. I don't think it's a particularly good Broncos team, but it is a very good Broncos defense. And we all know that. So you gave life to the superpower of the Denver Broncos. And when you do that, man, it changes the tone of everything moving forward. When you combine that with some of the injury issues that I think we know on the defensive side of the ball are going to deplete the team over time, I just feel like this was sort of death by 1,000 cuts once that changed. It's amazing one play, but that one play I think has consequence to the way we will remember this game.
Yeah, big time, right? And we were talking about it upstairs where to me, and again, not to put too much on one play because certainly that was in the first half. And let's not forget the Raiders went into the half down by 3 points, right? Like it's not like this game had been blown up and you're playing, just garbage time for 30 minutes. But I think for me, Fitz, when you look at that play, it just demonstrated where at least offensively and at least right now, it showed how thin the margin for error was for this Raiders offense, right? Because you and I were talking a second ago, right? There is a huge difference, colossal difference, being up 17-3 as opposed to being tied 10-10, right? And that's for any team in the NFL. But at least for other teams in the NFL, and I'm just saying for right now, as we sit here in the first week of October, it doesn't feel like the Raiders have enough, I don't want to say firepower, but they don't, maybe firepower is the word, right? Where they don't have enough right now to overcome an insurmountable lead, right? And I think we saw that. So again, not to put too much on a single play, the Minshew pick six, but again, like to me, it just kind of showed how aligned everything has to be, specifically on that side of the football, for the Raiders to find success in 2024.
I think back to the college game. I covered that a lot for Yahoo, and I was talking to a major college football coach a couple of weeks ago, and the thing he kept stressing is the margins are so thin. Mm-hmm. At some level, once you get to a certain spot, the margins are so thin. And I think the margins are even thinner for certain teams depending on what else you're dealing with. Look at San Francisco, who is a team that we all think has a ton of depth and should be a Super Bowl contender. And this year, because of the injuries they're facing and some of the ways that the season's going together, the margin for error just becomes thinner and thinner. It cost them a game today against Arizona. You can look across the board and find that. There are certain people that are margin erasers. Part of what makes Patrick Mahomes is that, frankly, he can go out and figure out a way to fix everything that ails something all the time. He's a genie in that sense. But again, look at another game today. Cincinnati up big in that game, and they can't find a way to take down Baltimore, and it comes down to a couple of plays. I think what we have to remember is that almost every game, every Sunday in the NFL is truly decided by a couple of plays. And when you may not be as deep or as talented as some of the other teams, you better execute. You better be right on top of it, which is something that in the wins shows up. In the wins, you see a lack of penalties. You see a lack of stupid turnovers. You see a lack of plays that sort of put you negative down and distance. And you understand that when you stay ahead of the chains and ahead of the process, you win football games, especially for the Raiders. Once you get behind on any of those things, man, you are digging yourself out of a hole. And when you've got Patrick Surtain back there and you're throwing at him and it turns into a pick six and an interception later in the game, like these are the things, these are the margins that are not existent for the Raiders the way they're built right now.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you wrote the penalties, Fitz, because they brought up there was a great graphic early in the broadcast where it was, I believe, through the first 13 games of Antonio Pierce's tenure, the Raiders were the lowest penalized team in the NFL. And you and I had this conversation a ton last year following October 1st. We talked about this damn near every week about how this version of the Raiders is causing so many of us to kind of stop and reflect and say, what are these Raiders in a great way, right? Disciplined, playing with effort, incredibly kind of dialed in on their P's and Q's, barely penalized. And that by and large kind of was their calling card for a lot of the first part of this season as well. You look at today, Fitz, 11 penalties, 79 yards. And again, we talk about the margins being so, so slim, or not slim, sorry, so slim for this Raiders team. And if you're giving up 11, we go back to the end of the penalty at the end of the first half, right? 3 points, right? You literally are putting points on the board as a result of penalties. And again, just so today feels uncharacteristic in that sense for the silver and black.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're this offense and you are in a situation where 1st and 10 becomes 1st and 15, that's suffocating. 1st and 10 becomes 1st and 20, that's suffocating. And frankly, you look at some of what we've talked a lot about Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator. You look at some of these play calls, and I really felt like the offense was dialing up the right things, but you got to be in the right situation to take advantage of those things. And if you're suddenly in 2nd and 20, there's just not a lot the way this offense is built right now. They can handle 2nd and 20. Also, you're putting so much water pressure up against the dam that this offensive line is right now. You're asking them to hold up through so much when everybody in the entire stadium knows what has to happen. Like, this is not a team built to convert 3rd and 13. That's just not how the Raiders are built. So even in the first half, when they started running the football really well, and you saw, okay, that was part of the rhythm early on. Like, they're getting big chunk yardage plays, a lot of plays in Denver territory. Like, they had a rhythm going. The easiest way to lose rhythm, penalties. That's what happens. And it bit them on the butt throughout the course of this entire game.
Yeah, and I think what's hard too, right, is that we did see some of those glimpses. We saw what this could be. We saw what this should look like. And you look at that opening drive, we saw Brock Bowers being Brock Bowers, right? And all of us are sitting, we were upstairs in the studio, and you see that throw from Minshew to Bowers. Bowers goes up and makes a play, makes a guy miss, boom, off to the races. That first drive, if I have it up here as I pull it up super quick, I believe 4 plays. Right? We go 4 plays, 70 yards in just under 3 minutes. And you're sitting there and you're saying, yes, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is what it's supposed to look like. The tight ends are getting involved, right? You're able to kind of operate off the run. You're able to use the pass. Like, it was yes, big fireworks. And then Fitz, it all changes. And again, to your point, not all of it comes down to the penalties. Not all of it comes down to that pick six, the Patrick Surtain 100-yard return. But death by paper cut, like you said, and it feels like the perfect way kind of to encapsulate what we saw today.
And the hard part is that's so much tougher to fix. If we're being honest, like the thing, because everybody's going to ask, well, what's this mean for the rest of the season? And certainly, if there's anything you and I have learned being around this team for as many years as we have, there's a lot of football left to be played.
Tons.
We all know that.
Yeah.
But one thing that you look at is you say, okay, so you lost a game. What's it mean moving forward? Well, there are some things that you see in this, you say, man, if you're going in tomorrow to the whole team and you're saying, hey, all we got to do is clean up. Hey, we gave them this game because we did A, B, and C. Fine. But in this game, it felt like the Raiders did A, B, C, D, E, F, G all wrong. And that's a tougher message. This wasn't ugly enough to burn the tape and never watch it again. But this is the thing. And I said this to you as we were texting during the game. I don't remember the last time I've seen a team in the first half make enough plays to win the game and make enough plays that should lose them the game all in the same first half. And that's the maddening thing about what we saw from this team throughout the course of an entire 60 minutes of football.
Yeah, it's one of those deals, right, where I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, if I were to say, Fitz, what's the one thing that happened today? Why did the Raiders lose? There isn't one, right? Like, there isn't one easy answer to this. And I suppose depending on if you want to be glass half full or glass half empty or just glass whatever, right? That changes the tone and the tenor of how you answer that question. Ergo, it changes the tone and the tenor of how you look at this game in kind of a macro view. But I think for me, and again, like just for the sake of transparency, we record after Antonio Pierce talks. He said during his post-game press conference, non-committal about who the starting quarterback is going to be going forward. We see Aiden O'Connell come in with just about a minute and a half left in the third quarter. And Fitz, he finishes his afternoon 10 of 20 for 21 yards and an interception, QBR of 42.5. And I think that if you're a fan and you were hoping to see some kind of spark, some sort of something, as Aiden O'Connell came in for the guard dog, unfortunately, we didn't see that today, did we?
No, and this is where it gets really ugly, right? Because if we're being real, you don't want to get into a situation where you're changing quarterbacks over and over and over again. I would ask everybody that's listening right now that thinks the answer is a quarterback change. When's the last time you saw a team make the playoffs that made multiple quarterback changes during the course of the season because of performance issues? Like, it just off the top of my head, I can't think of one. It just doesn't happen very often. So in my mind, what you have here, though, is a weird situation where I think Gardner, frankly, didn't play well enough. I mean, there were a couple of those picks in this game were throws he shouldn't have made. He didn't have to be aggressive in the situations he was aggressive in. So I understand the benching. The problem is if you put Aiden in, well, there's a mobility required to this offense that I don't believe Aiden has. And there's a mobility required behind the offensive line against that defensive front, particularly, that is not playing to Aiden's strengths. So this is one of those situations where everybody wants to put it all on, well, let's change the quarterback. I genuinely don't think that the outcome of this game would have been different if Aiden O'Connell had played all 60 minutes or if Gardner Minshew had played all 60 minutes. But the fact is, one of these guys is going to have to step up and really start making plays instead of making plays that cost the team. And that's realistically what happened for Gardner. I've been effusive in praise for Gardner when he plays well, but I think it is fair to turn around and say, hey, in this game, floating that ball to the end zone that resulted in a pick six, that's on him. The pick six that got, or the interception that got him benched, was an unnecessary risk throw that didn't need to happen. There were a couple of times he pushed the ball downfield when it felt like there were guys on crossing routes right in front of him that could have gotten first downs. Like at some point, a quarterback's job is to advance, to move the chains, and that just wasn't happening. So I understand it. I just don't think that this is a grass is always greener situation with this offense and the way it's built and Aiden O'Connell.
100%. And Gardner's line for the day, for those who are interested, 12 of 17, 137, gets sacked twice, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. And I think, look, we're less than an hour out from this game wrapping up, but I think the best thing that Antonio Pierce did in the short term, right, was to not make a rash decision regarding who the quarterback is. Because, look, I'm 100% with you, Fitz, right? 34 unanswered points is 34 unanswered points in the NFL, right? Doesn't matter if it's Gardner, if it's Aiden, if it's Joe Montana, Dameron, it doesn't matter, right? It's 34 unanswered. So I think that the fact that AP was not hasty in that decision and said, like, look, we're going to go back and we're going to, take stock of everything that we got to take stock of, is the right move, is the proper move, and it'll be really interesting to see kind of what happens over the course of the week. One thing that was nice to see, though, as we try to at least find some sort, I don't even want to say positives, because AP, again, was pretty straight, like, you lose this way in the NFL, like, there's not a lot of positives to take out, but from a very kind of just zero-sum game, this defense is better when Max Crosby is out there, right? Max is out there. He returns to work today. 2 sacks as I pull up his full line here. And again, man, it was just the man's the Energizer Bunny. Max finishes 3 total tackles, 2 sacks, 2 quarterbacks hits, 2 tackles for loss. And while he may not be at 100% yet, right? I mean, we heard him brought it up on the I mentioned on the broadcast. Might still be moving around a little gingerly. I mean, he's a really good football player, and any team, especially this Raiders defense, is better when he's out there.
Yeah, there were flashes in the first half,
Yeah.
especially with he and Christian Wilkins both, that you looked at and thought, man, this just looks beefy. This is why they spent all that money.
Mm-hmm.
This is strength on strength. And unfortunately, both guys are battling enough injury concerns that at this point, that becomes a concern for what the rest of the season looks like. You're right. The entire defense transformed, and Max Crosby only continues to prove that. That's why, in my mind, he's a defensive player of the year candidate. That's why he is truly the quarterback of this defense, because they go as Max goes. And for him to be back out there was big. And I thought there were moments like Robert Spillane had some tackles in this game that I thought were really incredible. And I know they credited on the broadcast that he's been a tackling machine throughout the course of the year. Also had a couple of plays I think he'd admit he wants back. That was sort of the process of this defense. I mean, they got to 34 and you sort of woke up, and this has been the case. This is still, I believe, a very talented defense that's well coached with guys that are in the right position. You just looked up all of a sudden, you're like, man, how did this get to 34? Like, it's amazing how that happened. I think the defense is playing better than the number that's assigned next to that, but also they're going to have to lock up, because at some point you got to look around and say, hey, I'm not sure that we can rely on the offense every week to hit 20. So you can't it doesn't matter what happens. You cannot let the other team hit 20. If they hit 20, you're swimming in negative territory.
Yeah. And just hearing you say that, Fitz, right? And we've talked a lot about this. I mean, really since April, May, since the offseason program, both on camera and off. Like, when I looked at the Raiders of 2024, right, and I said, if I were to prognosticate, like, what do they need to do to be successful that maybe is a little bit, I don't want to say different, but is unique to them? And I've said from jump, they have to be the ultimate team. They have to be the ultimate complementary football in all 3 phases. And if they're able to do that, I think that by and large they're going to have success. And unfortunately, whether it's the offense having a funky day, the defense having a funky day, the special teams not doing exactly what they need to do, we just haven't seen that consistently yet, Fitz. Right? I go back to the final, what was it, 12 and a half, whatever it was, minutes of the Ravens game, and to me that was like the little Polaroid, right? Like this is complementary football in all three phases, but we just haven't seen it consistently. And until we do, I think AP likes to talk about it all the time. I think unfortunately we're just going to ride the roller coaster until that gets figured out.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you have to be. There are two ways to look at all of this. You can look at this and say, hey, the sky's not falling. You're 2-3, plenty of football left. It's also fair to look at it and say, man, it took a absolutely wild fourth quarter comeback, the likes of which none of us expected, and then a win over a Broncos team that may, by the time this whole thing is said and done, be the worst team in the NFL or one of the worst teams in the NFL. You look at it and say, okay, like this is where the Raiders have to. The Raiders will. Let me say it this way: they will prove where they belong in the hierarchy. Like if we take our media hats off, if fans take their fan hats off, like the Raiders over the course of this season will prove where they belong. And for everybody that yells and screams, why do people talk about the Raiders like they're a last place team? It's up to them to not be that. Like this is that moment where this was a game, I think, against the Denver team that on paper is not better than the Raiders. They're, at least these two teams are comparable. Denver gets a big win here. I think the Raiders have to really come back from this and look in the mirror before they go into Pittsburgh and realize that the season's on the line. Like this is a spot you're going to decide. The players are going to decide over the course of the next 15, 16 days of the calendar year, as wild as it is to say that. They are going to decide over the course, in my mind, of the next 15, 16 days, exactly where this Raiders team is going to end up in the NFL. Are they going to end up picking in the top 10, or are they going to end up being a team that's sitting here battling for some way to get into the playoffs at the end of the year? That gets decided, and that gets decided on the field, because this was a bad Broncos team that just beat the snot out of this Raiders team. That's just real. So now, if you're the Raiders, you got to take that, and you got to figure out how you're going to use that moving forward to turn it into something positive.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, Fitz. Right? When this is not great for our hot take alert, if I agree with you all the time, but like you hit the nail on the head in the sense that the NFL is the ultimate meritocracy, right? Like teams don't end up in the playoffs that don't deserve to end up in the playoffs. Teams don't win 2, 3, 4 games because we had not the ball bounced the wrong way for us 9 different times, right? Like when we zoom out and we look at 2024 as a whole, the Raiders, and we hear it from coaches all the time, you get what you earn in the NFL, right? So there is still a very real chance that the Raiders earn 8, 9, whatever it is, 10 wins. But the flip side of that is you have to make sure that you don't earn the opposite of that, right? You have to make sure that you don't put yourselves in a position where you're looking at the holidays or you're looking at late November, early December, you're like, what are we trying to figure out here? And again, 2-3, right? If you win on Sunday, and this is the best and also the worst part of the NFL, right? If the Raiders win on Sunday back at home, everything changes, right? The tone and tenor of everything surrounding this team completely changes. You're back to 500. You're in the thick of things. You're in the mix. But today, the Raiders got to wear it, man. That there's no two ways around it. The Raiders have to wear a tough division loss. And now as we sit here, Fitz, 0-2 in the AFC West, which is not a great place to be.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll just remind everybody, 2-3 right now. I mean, look at the standings in the AFC. Cincinnati's 1-4, as crazy as that is. So you start looking around 2-3. 2-3 is right in the thick of it. Like the Jets are 2-3. Is that what anybody expected? No, but that's where they sit right now. And if you're the Broncos, you're surprising 3-2. The Broncos are sitting there saying, "Hey, we're figuring out a way." There's plenty of playoff opportunity left in front, the way the AFC is playing out so far, because so far everybody is sort of crammed together. There's not enough of a deficit right now in games that you can't turn this thing around. What you don't want to do is turn around and wake up in 3 or 4 weeks, and instead of being 2-3 or 2-6, now you got to dig yourself out of a hole. If you can just keep yourself, even though it's wildly maddening for fans, if you can get to the halfway point of the season at even 4-4, if you get to the halfway point of the season playing 50-50 football, playing 500, you're going to be okay. So I just think that there is a moment of, hey, take a deep breath. And then the coaching staff and the players are going to have to look in the mirror and figure out, okay, the issues that are not going to get solved. Like there's not suddenly going to be Patrick Mahomes walking through the door. There's not suddenly going to be, the Raiders offense of the early 80s walking through the door. Like this isn't going to happen. So now you got to look at it and say, with the cards that we are dealt, how are we going to play poker for the rest of the season? That's the chess match that, frankly, Antonio Pierce and the rest of the staff will figure out, and that's what players are going to have to buy into. And it's going to take a different level of attention to detail, a different level of execution from literally everybody. Every one of the 53 every Sunday is going to have to come in knowing that they just don't have room for error because every little error actually messes it up for the entire team and every one of their teammates.
And look, it's something that, and I don't want to pretend that everything is great after the Raiders lose 34-18 and 34 unanswered the whole, or excuse me, 30, yeah, however many answered, 27 I think unanswered. But I do think that if you're looking at something that you can take away from this game and say, okay, maybe we're trending in the right direction in area A, 115 rushing yards. This is now back-to-back games, Fitz. And I talked about it last week with our friend Bryce Butler. Like, you don't run for 150 plus in the NFL on accident, right? You don't go 115 plus 2 weeks in a row on accident. So it feels like to me something is shifting and we are getting close to some sort of alignment in that area of the game. And we talked about it. And AP has said this from the jump. They want to be a run-first team. The Raiders want to control the line of scrimmage. So again, the game obviously gets away from you. You're not able to commit to the run game like you'd like to. But now through 2 weeks, it does feel like there is something that is coming to fruition in that area of the Raiders offense.
Yeah, the Raiders definitely. And by the way, Amir Abdullah, a
Hey,
sneaky good game.
shout out to Amir, right?
Yeah, I mean they ran the ball hard today, and I think both backs found a lot of holes and found opportunities to turn little runs into good runs, gap runs, and I thought that was really impressive. So you're right, like parts of this are clicking. It's just all. And how many times have we said this over the years we've been talking about this team together? At some point, everything has to click together at the same time, and so often we see like 1 year it'll be, hey, the offense is there, the defense isn't. 1 year it's like, man, the offense and defense are pretty good, but the special teams weren't there this year. Like we've lived all of this over the years as Raiders fans. It's like, oh, the running game's good, but the quarterback isn't. The quarterback's good, but the running game isn't. Like there's just at some point, all of these little pieces have to click together at the same time. And when that does, if that can happen this year, they can still win a lot of football games.
I'm going to leave you with this quick note, Fitz, is I believe it was after that second drive. I'll have to go back and double check, but I tweeted this out, that at the time, the Raiders had ran the ball 9 times and passed the ball 7 times. That's the formula, right? Like that is how they want to be built. Fast forward to the end of the game, the Raiders attempted 37 passes. They ran the ball 25 times. So again, we see how dramatically those numbers change. And again, just unfortunately, one of the reasons why your Raiders are sitting 2-3 and that magical 8-game win streak against the Broncos is no more. Fitz, build me up on the way out. You and our friends at Yahoo are doing all sorts of cool stuff and fun stuff. What are you working on? Where can our people find you and just engage with all the hashtag content?
Yeah, you can find me on all social media at Jason Fitz. You guys know that at this point. You yell it enough on my takes. And then Yahoo, I've got inside coverage, podcast we do 3 times a week on all the NFL news. And then the College Football Power Hour, our college football podcast that goes up twice a week. I'm part of both of those shows. You can check those out at Yahoo Sports, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on YouTube. So go check them out. Really proud of the work we're doing. They're really proud of that. And constantly giving more Raiders takes and more Raiders love on those shows too.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, Fitz, one of these days, we were joking about it yesterday. One of these days, we'll get you on here to talk about a win. It'll happen. I believe in it. It's funny how the schedule has worked itself out, that all you have done through no one's fault is come on here at the least opportune moments to talk about the silver and black. So I am willing in 2 weeks. So it's Steelers next Sunday, and then you are back for Rams, if memory serves. That's who we have after the Steelers.
Feels right. Yeah.
Feels right.
Yeah.
I'm willing.
Yeah.
Obviously, hey, take care of business on Sunday against the Steelers, get us back into the good graces of the NFL. But I'm willing a victory for us in 2 weeks' time against the Los Angeles Rams, so you and I can have a celebration on here. Because it's always fun to see you, but it'd be, admittedly, a little more fun if we got to talk about a dub.
I'm not superstitious. I'm just a little stitious. I'm starting to think it's me.
Yeah. We shall see. Again, like you said though, Fitz, I'm gonna throw it right back at you. Long season, a lot of football left. Certainly a bad day at the office, but we have a lot more to talk about, and I promise you this, Raider Nation, Fitz and I will do that as we soldier on. Our friend Bryce Butler is back with us next week, and then we will see Fitz in 2 weeks for our next episode of the 5th Quarter, presented by Twitch.